Now that was a race. If you thought it was boring, hold on to your hats because you'll find out just how exciting it really was. I'm Chip from the Digital Grandstand and this is Beyond the Finish Line for the 2017 British Grand Prix. And yes, we will explain why those tire issues presented themselves at that stage. Well, Lewis Hamilton won the 2017 British Grand Prix in commendable fashion, making him a 5-time winner in the UK along with the greats Jim Clark and Alain Prost. At the first glance, it was not necessarily the most thrilling victory, but make no mistake, it was a brilliant display of racecraft that both directly and indirectly helped his cause of cutting the points gap to his main title rival, Sebastian Vettel. Following him over the line and completing the podium were his Mercedes teammate Valtteri Bottas and the Ferrari Finn Kimi Räikkönen. But let's start with the quali session, shall we? In an almost blueprint copy of Austria 2 weeks ago, it was the turn of the other Mercedes racer to change his gearbox ahead of time and therefore incur a 5-place drop on the starting grid. Bottas was going to start 6th at best. However, it was not to be. Like Hamilton in Austria, he had to get out of Q2 on softs, therefore not having the greatest setup for the faster super softs in Q3. A scruffy couple of laps in the final part of quali meant he only got the 4th fastest time, which translated into P9 at the start. Other notable name from quali was Fernando Alonso. In typical British fashion, Q1 started on inters, but by the end of it the track was almost completely dry. Alonso and Esteban Ocon gambled on doing a lap on super softs and, well, it paid off. Surprisingly, Ricciardo was also a Q1 casualty, with a technical issue preventing him from qualifying higher than 19th. Spoiler, it will be another great recovery race for the Aussie. A comment made by Vettel after quali is also worth mentioning, considering what unfolded in the race. The Ferrari man claimed that the red car was 10 km per hour faster than the Merc in the long, fast Copse corner. Obviously, more speed equals more energy transferred to the tire. Hamilton's pole lap was something to behold, a run worthy of Clark and Senna translated in a half a second gap to Kimi Räikkönen. Also worth mentioning is the gap from Räikkönen back to Vettel, 0.2 of a second. Behind them, the Red Bulls were again in no man's land. On race day, during the formation lap, Palmer was forced into a DNS with a loss of hydraulic pressure and the rest of the field had to do a second install lap. When the red lights finally went on, fire was visible at the rear of Vettel's car. Trying to get as much heat into his brakes during the formation laps, he overheated those and, in turn, this meant he got away rather slowly. In front and behind him, both Räikkönen and Verstappen had great starts, as had Hamilton for that matter. In the first few corners, Max tried to overtake both Ferraris, but Räikkönen positioned his car just right and Verstappen had to re-overtake Vettel round the outside. Clean, fair racing, but Sebastian's race was now half ruined. He got stuck behind the slower car of Max, which was a problem Ferrari would have rather avoided. Out in front, Hamilton was pulling away from Kimi, as the Finn in turn pulled away from the Verstappen-Vettel duel. On the exit of Beckett's, the Toro Rossos came to blows on lap 1, with Kvyat oversteering into Sainz, taking the Spaniard out. Toro Rosso's race was over, and the safety car came out for 3 laps. At the restart, Hamilton judged perfectly the gap to Räikkönen and got away without any fuss. Kimi in turn had the measure of Vettel and Verstappen. Behind them, Bottas was making progress. He got past Van Dorn and Perez easily enough, while Ocon made a superb move to get himself in front of both his teammate and Hülkenberg, but the German was having none of it. Down the hanger straight, he pulled one on Ocon and regained 5th. At the back, Ricciardo and Alonso had work to do. Overtaking cars left, right and center, Fernando got as higher up as 13th, but he got stuck behind Lance Stroll. Ricciardo had a rare scruffy moment while trying to overtake the Saubers, ran onto the grass, dropped to the back of the field and had to do everything all over again. Calmly, he settled down and did just that. By now, at the front, Hamilton had an almost 3 seconds gap to Räikkönen, while Max and Seb were some 5 seconds further behind. The Brit wanted more. He nailed some fast laps to get the gap up to about 4 seconds, getting out of undercut range. Behind Verstappen, Vettel was growing impatient. He tried a daring move into the Maggots-Beckett's complex, but Max defended very well and retained. Lap 18, Vettel and Ferrari had enough. The battle for the win was already lost, but they could at least try and salvage a double podium. Vettel pitted, undercutting Verstappen. Max's stop was a tad slower, but even without this, he wouldn't have been able to emerge ahead of Sebastian. Now, it was all about keeping Bottas behind. With nothing to gain or lose, Räikkönen pitted on the 24th lap, with Hamilton a lap later. Lewis emerged just in front of Bottas, who was yet to stop. The Brit quickly pulled away, thus not impeding his teammates' charge. Meanwhile, Ferrari had an issue. The car was sliding wide through the slow corners, not responding as instantly as the Merc to the sudden change of direction and scrubbing the tires across the track. With both Kimi and Seb on softs, they had to keep the gaps to the Mercedes, but also keep the tires in good enough shape for them to last until the end of the race. The Mercs had better balance. In the long turns, they were able to turn the car in late and go gentle. Ferrari's car concept meant they had to be more aggressive in the corners, slide a bit on entry and rotate the car vigorously. Bottas put the hammer down. He pushed hard for a few laps, and when he came to the pits on lap 32, he made sure Seb's tires were already in a far from ideal state. On fresh, super softs, he began to close the gap. In turn, Vettel had to push hard, further weakening his tires. Behind them, Ricciardo made his super softs last for a whopping 32 laps. Taking into account the amount of overtaking and hard racing he had done while preserving the rubber, it really highlights his racecraft. The Aussie emerged from the pits just behind the Dicing Force Indias, and he made easy work of both into Stowe. First Perez, then Ocon a lap later. Hulkenberg was next, in 6th, some way ahead but encountering ERS problems. Lap 32 and Alonso was out with another inevitable issue. This time a fuel pressure one. 11 laps into his second stint, Hamilton complained of blistering on his front tires. By this time he had a 12 seconds gap to Raikkonen with 15 laps of the race remaining. More than a manageable gap for Lewis to nurse the tires home. Lap 43. Bottas had caught Vettel. He tried a dive on the outside of Stowe, but Vettel defended. He missed the braking point into Vale though and locked the left front tire. A lap later, with DRS, Bottas surged ahead on the hanger straight, claiming the final podium place. With his tires in appalling condition, Vettel backed off, running some 1.5 seconds off the pace. Behind him, Verstappen was also struggling, therefore there was seemingly no pressure for the German. Raikkonen was running in second place still, some 10 seconds ahead of Bottas, but with more worn-out rubber. With 8 laps remaining, Valtteri started to close the gap once more. Lap 48, disaster struck for Raikkonen. His left front tire delaminated just before Copse. It was still inflated, but the tread was flapping around. He came into the pits and Bottas got past. After starting P9, the Finn was now running second to his teammate. 1 lap later though, surprise! Vettel ran wide at left field with his left front flat. After going round at a much slower pace than his teammate and getting overtaken by numerous cars, the championship leader dived into the pits. Raikkonen got back to third, while Verstappen, having nothing to lose, came in for his own precautionary pit stop. On the last lap, Ricciardo concluded his amazing recovery drive with another overtake, this time on Hulkenberg into Stowe. With Hamilton taking the win and Vettel down in 7th, the Drivers' Championship is almost back to square one. Only 1 point between Seb and Lewis, with Bottas 23 points behind the leader. In the Constructors' Championship, Mercedes have a serious lead of 55 points over Ferrari. The Scarlet team really needs to strike back in Hungary if they want to claw back some ground. All in all, it was another great race of an already great season. Yes, Hamilton seemed to get away with an easy one, but it was not the case. His pace ahead of the pit stops was all crucial, making sure that Ferrari were pushing their tires hard. In the end, it paid off big time, with Vettel taking the biggest blow and seeing his advantage in the standings all but disappear. And that was the 2017 British Grand Prix. It wasn't a Hamilton versus Vettel on-track duel, but it had so much more. What are your thoughts of this Grand Prix? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more F1 related content. I've been Chip. You can find me on Twitter at chip_DGS, and that was Beyond the Finish Line for the 2017 British GP.